RTE Soccer Women's World Cup podcast, sponsored by Cadbury. For grassroots to national level, a supporter and a half of women's football in Ireland.
Turn the world round, shut the show down. I've been spinning, couldn't slow down. On the road now.
All right, Raf Giallo here, and you're welcome along to the RTE Soccer Women's World Cup podcast. Every match is live on RTE Television and the RTE Player. It's 24 hours now, though, since Ireland's hopes of reaching the last 16 were ended by Canada, but there's still one group game to go against Nigeria. And I'm joined today by Ireland international Rianna, Jarrett, and RTE Sport Online's Anthony Pyne to reflect more on the Girls in Green's World Cup so far and to start to look ahead to Monday's third and final fixture. And Rianna, as you told us on Monday, you're in Australia at the moment, supporting the team, but also you have that extra thing of these are very good friends of yours and long-time teammates. So what were your emotions in the stands as the elimination was confirmed?
I think I speak on behalf of everyone, not only as like a player that's been involved in the squad, not only someone that's out here following them, but I think every single person in Ireland that has followed the journey either from start to finish or even just as the campaign has kicked off. Was bitterly disappointing to when the final whistle blew last night and it ended in defeat. I think the girls gave it absolutely everything. I don't think you can't fault them for their effort, for their commitment. They put their bodies on the line. They gave it absolutely everything. And I think the biggest disappointment is the two games were there for the taking. It's probably a tale of two halves. I think if we go back to the Australia game, we weren't in it in the first half, but the second half we kind of had the Australians on the ropes a little bit, and who knows if we could have got that equaliser, it would have been a different game. And then the same speaks for the Canadian game last night. I think the first half we absolutely went at them, and that's when we were at our best. Now, obviously, them getting the goal just before halftime was an absolute kick in the teeth and would have changed the halftime team talk, because there's a huge difference between going in 1-0 up and going in 1-1 just after conceding, and then obviously conceding straight away after halftime was an absolute nightmare. And to be honest, to be fair to the Canadians, they came out a different animal in the second half, and we never got going, and that was felt around the stadium. The Irish crowd, to be fair to them, they tried to lift the girls. They kept singing when it went quiet, when things weren't going our way. They tried to lift it, and it was great to hear and great to see. But unfortunately, we just couldn't get a foothold in that second half.
Yeah, and Anthony, you talked about the long journey from Brisbane to Perth, but it probably feels shorter when there's excitement and anticipation. But I'd say the journey maybe for the team going the opposite way off the back and knowing that essentially the World Cup is over, that journey will feel a little bit longer.
Yeah, of course. They went straight back after the game last night, and they just had a recovery day today, and they have a day off tomorrow. And so you could see when they were devastated. Kate McCabe was devastated because they believed that they could get out with the group. And as Rianna says, it's in a way it's nearly worse than getting well beaten in both matches, because you come away with regrets. You come away looking at certain moments in both of them matches. God, if only we hadn't done this, or we had to take our chances there. But that's testament to how far they've come. And they ran two very accomplished teams extremely close, but ultimately the margins did for them. Just taking their chances, punishing Canada when they were well on top, because Canada were way out of sorts in the first half yesterday. They were actually terrible. They made a triple substitution at halftime when they brought on Sinclair, came on Zadorsky, and Sophie Schmidt. And they just come out with more purpose and energy, and Ireland, having been rattled by that goal just before the break, they never got really set. They never set themselves properly in the first 10 minutes of the second half, and that's where they lost the game. Of course they're disappointed. It probably would have been a fairly somber journey back, but they've still got a game to play. They've still got a chance to get points on the board or a win on the board at a World Cup, break that duck, and end it on something of a positive.
Yeah, and something you told us on Monday, Rianna, was you'd love to see Ireland play 5 to 10 yards higher up the pitch, and then we would see what the benefits and the knock-on effects in every line of the pitch. And it's fair to say we probably saw that in terms of the likes of Denise and Sinead and Katie being able to play higher up the pitch, and consequently to essentially rattle Canada.
Yeah, and they definitely did. They definitely started that bit higher. They started with that little bit more intense. There was more intensity about how they were playing, how they were pressing, when they were going. And And I think Katie spoke about that in her post-game interview as well. She spoke that they learned a lot from the first game, and especially the first half against the Australians. And I think that we're at our best when we don't let teams come onto us, because it's very hard to get a foothold of the game then when that happens. I think we've seen that in the second half. As Anthony says, we were probably a little bit knocked by what happened just before halftime, and we kind of maybe switched off, but we couldn't get a grip of the game in the second half. I think we were unable to retain possession. We were unable to get any sort of kind of press or pressure on the Canadian backline, and that was the difference. And they ultimately punished us. And to be honest, in the second half, they had a number of chances that they'll probably be bitterly disappointed with that they didn't take. Likewise with us in the first half.
So I was just going to say they took off Buchanan at half time for Zadorsky. She was getting Caruso was taking her to the cleaners. So
she was on a yellow as well. So it was
She really had her on the ropes. I mean, that was as you talk about the changes. All those players are well into their 30s. Like they've got I don't know how many caps they have between them. So you're bringing on quality experience in that situation. You know, and even tonight it was at the Australia Nigeria game. Ashwala came off the bench for Nigeria, turned the game on its head. You know, this is a Barcelona star. This is the levels we're talking about. You know, we should bear that in mind, that even these countries have that depth of talent that it's hard to compete. It's hard to compete with that over 90 minutes.
Yeah, and you know, in your reflective piece after the game, Anthony, you talked about one player we haven't really touched on too much, which is Rusha Littlejohn, and you know, you pointed out, you know, the kind of you know, the distance she's covering in that midfield, because we're talking about players. We tend to talk about players slightly higher up the field, but she has had an important role kind of anchoring that midfield.
Well, yeah, she covered more distance than any other Irish player against Australia. It's like over 10,000 kilometers. She covered that match. And I thought she was brilliant in the time she was on the pitch last night. I mean, she locked up Jessie Fleming. She did a great job on her. Really did a great job on her. She was passing backwards and sideways on. Like, that's not what she does. She picks holes. She punches holes. Littlejohn did a really good job on her. And it's just unfortunate again. Like when you talk about depth, Rusha was never going to have another 90 in her. I don't think. Like, she has an Achilles issue that she has to manage as well. And when she went off, we just started to get a little ragged with the changes. Lucy Quinn came off at halftime. I'm not really sure why that was. If that was tactical, I personally think it was a mistake. I thought she was anchoring that.
I think Vera came out and said that they brought Abby Larkin on for something different. I just think that a substitution like that. I think that a substitution like that at halftime is an interesting one, because I think that Lucy Quinn was not only well in the battle in the first half, but I do think that down that right hand side, she looked like she could potentially create a thing. She was breaking up play, but she was also running in behind as well. So I was. Obviously, you'll never falter. Like Abby Larkin done very well in the Australia game when she came on, but I just think the timing of it more so than the actual substitution itself was interesting.
Yeah, and
speaking, I agree. Yeah, no, sorry, I just think that was a mistake. Like Abby Larkin she came on the last day when we were 1-0 down. You know, chasing the game, it removes the pressure on a young player to throw her into a situation where it just makes something happen. You know, got nothing to do. She was great. You put her on a half time when it's 1-1 against the reigning Olympic champions, where you know you're going to have to live without the ball. Games on a knife edge. Lucy Quinn and Anya O'Gorman had done very well on that right side. Combined well, physical, solid, experienced. To change that at half time, you know, maybe on the hour mark or 70 minutes, but it didn't work. And you know, unfortunately, once we are a team that when we go behind against teams like Canada, and it's hard for anybody, but we particularly find it difficult to get ourselves back into games. So, you know, it was unfortunate. We just that 10 minutes after halftime again, we gave up that goal that ultimately lost the match.
Yeah, and all the substitutions, Rianna, they were all like the dice had been completely thrown by the 65th minute, which was kind of interesting. Obviously, the half-time substitution, then there was another, and then there was the triple sub as well. Do you feel maybe Vera Pauw could have maybe held at least one or two more cards until later and deeper into the game?
No, I was going to say it's a catch-22. I'm like, she makes a sub. She feels like now is the right time. There's over 25 minutes left on the clock. We'd already kind of lost our foothold in the game at that point. So So something needed to change. Maybe throwing three on at the same time, in hindsight, probably wasn't the thing to do. But then if she didn't make those substitutions and the same thing happened, you're like, oh, she didn't make any subs, if that makes any sense. But I think we just lost all sort of shape, kind of when that happened. And I suppose the game was a lot more open, but we didn't capitalize on that when we won the ball back. I think our biggest thing was when we won the ball back, we were too quick to give it back to the Canadians. And to be honest, watching from the sideline, the only one that looked like creating anything was Kate McCabe. I think that she carried the team and the nation on her back in the kind of last 20 minutes and was nearly creating things out of nothing. You looked at her when she picked the ball up on the right-hand side, just inside the Canadian half, and managed to pull something onto our left-hand side. And I think that was the problem. We could have been there for another 15, 20 minutes. And I still don't think we would have pulled one back, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Anthony, just on that as well, and also something Anya Gorman said, that Ireland, just in the early part of the second half, with Canada also making changes, that we didn't adjust quickly enough, were her words.
Yeah, well, I mean, the momentum shifted with the three. You're bringing on three good players that were obviously strong. And by the way, they got a rollicking at half time as well. Bear Priestman did say that they were way up in that first half, having not played well against Nigeria. So they obviously had a few home truths, and the reaction in that first 10 minutes was more energy, and they moved the ball quicker. And yeah, we just got caught. We got caught. The first goal was a little unlucky. Well, it was unlucky. Megan just skidded off her studs. I mean, the ball could have gone anywhere. It was into the bottom corner. And then the second goal, I think, you're looking at back, we just weren't properly set. That will frustrate us. But look, with hindsight, we can pick the bones of this. In an in-game situation, managers, that's their job. It's a difficult job. They have to make calls. Obviously, Vera Pauw thought it was the right thing to do at the time. It's just, on reflection, it didn't quite work out for us. That's the frustrating thing. But that's football, ref. Sometimes it goes for you, and it didn't go for us yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. And after the game, also on our highlight show on RT2, and the RT player Richie Sadler and Maeve Burker were talking about some of Vera Pauw's post-match comments. So it was regard to a couple of things. One of them was she could see the equaliser coming, and she said that to Tony O'Donoghue in the mix zone afterwards. And the other thing was just in terms of the team being newcomers, which may mean in terms of them being newcomers to the World Cup stage, but also the flip side, some people could argue that actually the defence that was there with the number of caps, they're not necessarily newcomers in that sense. So let's just listen to what Richie Sadler and Maeve Burka had to say.
A couple of comments there about the team growing and not having as much experience as the opponents today. Is that a fair comment, given the number of caps and the experience that the side does have?
Well, I think first of all, I'd share her disappointment that we lost. That's not what we wanted, and it's really disappointing that at the earliest opportunity or the earliest possible point, we know we're out of the tournament. But to make a comment like that, the team is still growing and they're newcomers. That back five had 453 caps between them. So forget using words like newcomers or growing or learning the game about that back five. So I wonder how that's heard within the dressing room. It just seems like one of those comments that didn't really make a hell of a lot of sense. And she said she's turned at one point to her assistant and said, I could see the goal was coming. You're the coach. If you knew something was coming, what action did she take to prevent it? So puzzling couple of comments, but the overall thing is disappointment that we're out, that we lost, and that so much of that second half was completely at odds with some of the good stuff we saw in the first half.
Puzzling comments is a very diplomatic way of putting it, Richie.
Daft, and which I wouldn't agree with. I'll go further than that. Like it's don't be calling players with that amount of experience newcomers, particularly when the offence that they're regarded of committing is lacking concentration or not playing till half time. You tell children that. So there are some things they'll have to experience in the World Cup, which you can say, fair enough. They haven't played in front of 80,000. They haven't played in front of a global audience. They haven't played with the stakes as this high. Grand. But don't say that it's their inexperience is the reason they didn't know that you keep playing till the whistle.
Vera Pauw's language, and she has said this herself, she is very direct, she is Dutch, it's the way she communicates, and sometimes things are lost in translation because English isn't her first language. However, those comments today, the comments that she made, Maeve, after the first match about Marissa Shiva's mistake, she called it a mistake. She obviously dropped Marissa today, and then today talking about having no cover for the first goal. Is she deflecting the blame to players there?
I think so, and obviously we're all disappointed, like Richie said, about the result today. We really
I think we're really hopeful, especially after Katie's goal went in, that they'd progress, or at least that they would have stayed in the tournament by the time we would have been talking tonight. But yeah, I think Vera is definitely trying to deflect a little bit, and it's disappointing for a manager to be trying to deflect a little bit more of the blame on the players at this stage, because they can only do what they're told to do, I suppose, and play in a structure and a formation that they're clearly told to do, and that's how they train it as well. And yeah, I mean, they're definitely not lacking experience, and particularly at the back, saying that we always concede a goal before half time, like it's making excuses really, I suppose, and the players are well capable of performing and like that. They've plenty of experience between them, and I think it is just kind of just disappointed to hear those comments. We should be trying to, I suppose, look at it just purely from a football side as to what really went wrong.
So that was Maeve de Burke, and before that, Richie Sadler. And Rianna, you had a chance to just listen to Pau before we started recording today. So what were your kind of interpretations of the manager's post-match comments and reflections on the game?
I think it's interesting. I think in her whole video, she states that any team that she's been involved at, that she's brought from one level to the next, maybe into their first major tournaments. Obviously, Ireland aren't the first team that she's got there. She's spoken about that has happened, that they've had that lack of experience at that tournament level. And yes, it's Ireland's first major tournament, but as the lads in the studio said, that back five in particular, regardless of anybody else on the pitch, have over 400 caps. They're our most capped players in terms of Anya, Niamh Fahey, Louise Quinn, and obviously Katie McCabe has over 70 caps as well, and obviously still plenty more years left than her. So that it is an interesting statement, interesting comment. Yes, they're inexperienced in terms of tournament football, but they're still very experienced in terms of international football and playing against the highest level of opposition, because every qualifier we play and we've ever played, being the lower seed, we always get the higher ranked teams, even in our qualification phases. So they're like no newcomers to play against top quality players and top quality teams.
Yeah, and Anthony, what are you, I suppose, what's your take, but also how consistent is it with her general messaging in the press conferences you've attended?
Well, I would say, just to note, first of all, like it's English is her second language, so like sometimes to take what she says literally, you probably shouldn't do it. Like, newcomers, maybe that was lost a little bit. Maybe she meant, I don't know, newcomers to this particular level is probably what she was trying to get at, and it came across not proper, not great. But as Rianna says, we have oodles of experience in that back line. But she is a straight talking manager that can be quite just blunt. I mean, she speaks her mind, and she's clear about what she expects from the team and wants the team to do. I think, look, inevitably where this is leading is her future, because her contract is up in a few weeks. There's still no word on that. We don't really know where it is. We know what her point of view is, because Vera Pauw has said consistently, and she said it again after the game on last night, that she wants to stay. She wants to stick around. But there's been no progress on that from the FA. We haven't heard any white smoke. So that's going to be the next thing here, Raf. Like, that's the way it is, because Ireland cannot progress now. There'll be more media over the weekend. These questions will keep coming until there's a definitive answer. And we see what is her future. Is she going to get another campaign? But I don't know at this point. I would say it's probably not a great sign that this has been going on for 2 months and it hasn't been sorted. But you'd expect that we will hear something in the next couple of weeks, because, as I said, the contract is up. So we have to hear something one way or the other.
Yeah, and the post-match interview that's been referred to there, that when she was talking to Condy Donoghue, people can watch it. It's on YouTube and also on RT.ie. It's yesterday's daily World Cup podcast. But the reason, obviously, that that Ireland can't get to the last 16, of course, is just due to the pure mathematics, and there is still one more game to go, which is against Nigeria. And Anthony, you were there. They can make it through to the last 16, and they stunned the co-hosts Australia there in Brisbane. And I suppose, what's your takeaway from the game? Because watching it from afar over here in Ireland, it was an exciting game, and obviously a stunning result.
It was the game of the tournament so far, and hats off to Nigeria. Fair play to them. They still have work to do. They have to get a result against Ireland, and that won't be easy for them. Ireland are objectively a difficult team to play against, and they're a proud bunch who will want to end on high, and they'll have really good support in Brisbane. It's a great stadium, by the way, Raf. It's such a shame. It's such a pity that we're not in the hunt to get out with this group, because it would have been a hell of an occasion there in that ground in the Brisbane Stadium. There was about just under 50,000 there tonight. Excellent atmosphere. And they are a really decent team. They've got some really good players. They're organised. They have pace in every part of the pitch, and they were able to bring on Oshuala off the bench to turn the game effectively. That raised the eyebrows when the teams dropped. I don't think she had a great game in the first match against Canada, but she is a quality player. But like Christine Sinclair coming on for Canada against Ireland, to bring on that quality with an hour gone, it's such an asset for a team to do that. And she caused Australia, immediately she won a corner from which they scored. Then she panicked Alana Kennedy into making a rushed header back to the keeper, and then finished it really well. They give you chances. Australia did create a lot of chances tonight. On another night, they probably could have scored 5 goals. But they're good to watch. Cooper's team, very confident and comfortable on the ball. And they'll be a real test for Ireland. But they've given themselves a brilliant chance of getting out of the group now. They could win the group, because Australia and Canada have to play each other. They both need a result. They could cancel each other out. And if Nigeria beat us, then they'll top the group, and I think I'm not sure who'll be playing the last 16 in that instance, but what an achievement that would be for them. So yeah, hats off to them. They've blown that group wide open, and it sets up a great final round of games in Group B on Monday. Should be a few more twists and turns to come.
Yeah, they're playing for the prize of facing the teams in England's group, which would be Group D, and potentially
Denmark,
and England, Denmark, China, which are the teams, and also Haiti as well in that group. But Rianna, just on from a bit scared, probably a little bit worrying from an Irish point of view, given you see Nigeria going 1-0 down to what are the co-hosts and a very good team, obviously shorn of Mary Fowler and probably even more significantly of Sam Kerr, but still they go 1-0 down, and then they have the quality to come back, not just equalise, but actually kick on as well. And given that Monday now won't be a dead rubber in any way, Ireland have a real game on their hands.
I think, regardless of that result that they had tonight, they were always still going to be in with an opportunity to qualify. The fact that they drew against the Canadians, but obviously the fact that they went and beat Australia was absolutely amazing for them. As you said, they stand a great chance now of topping the group, and I think for them the key to that game was they equalised literally in added time just before halftime, which would have changed obviously the whole outlook of the game going into the second half, because Australia scored just before halftime as well. But they picked their moments when they pressed Australia. They picked the moments when they went at them, and they were very physical and fast and direct at times, which the Australian backline could not deal with. And I think the third goal with the Alana Kennedy mistake, you could see it coming from a mile away. As soon as that ball went over the top and you seen her running alongside Alana Kennedy and you see Mackenzie Arnold coming out, you knew exactly the way it was going to unfold. And it was, as Anthony said, it was a very tidy finish once the ball ended up around the goalkeeper. But Ireland, they always knew, going into this competition, that yes, Australia were one of the top ranked teams. Yes, Canada were the Olympic champions, but Nigeria, the top ranked Nigerian team for a reason. I think we've seen that they frustrated the life out of Canada in that first game, and we've seen kind of more how they like to play tonight against Australia as well. So it was never going to be an easy game. Obviously, we have our pride and we want to get our first win in a major tournament. So it'll be a very interesting game. It'll just be interesting to see how Ireland line up going into that game, and if anything changes either personnel wise or tactic wise. I think we might actually, because of the speed and the threat of them in behind and their power, see us sit a little bit deeper, which who knows what will happen.
Yeah, because that's what I was actually gonna make that or ask you about that actually, because obviously it worked out well against Canada in the first half to press up high, but as you said, Nigeria's pace is frightening, especially down the flanks. But in regard to, I suppose, maybe even the personnel changes as well, do you change anything at the back for Ireland or in midfield? Or, Vera Howe, in her post-match interview, she suggested that she'd probably largely stick with her first choice team, and I think there are 4 outfield players at the moment who haven't featured at the World Cup yet, and I guess it's a game scenario situation if they do come in.
Yeah, I don't see much changing. I think it'll be rely on like how players are after the last game. Obviously, we mentioned Ruth Little's on earlier. She's played very little football in terms of club football in the build up to the World Cup, and obviously we know from the qualifier against Scotland she missed that through injury as well. So it'd be the likes of her. Sinead Farley obviously hasn't played that much football since returning to professional football and football at this level. So they're kind of the questions that you'd look at. But I don't see there being too many changes. As she said in her post-match interview as well, Ireland still want to finish on a high. We still want to do the country proud. So the starting 11, you might not see very many changes, but then it's game dependent on how the game is going, whether we'll see those outfield players that haven't featured get an opportunity. But as you said, it's football at the highest level, it's tournament football. We can't just automatically give players appearances because they haven't played.
Yeah, and apart from Australia 2, Nigeria 3, before that, Portugal had beaten Vietnam 2-0 in Group B, and also in Group B, the 2 teams that reached the 2019 World Cup final, USA and Netherlands, drew 1-1 in Wellington. And Rianna, just on the US, I mean, they still have quality. Some of the older stars are still there. There's the likes of Sophia Smith, of course, who's kind of the new wave. But do they seem a little bit more vulnerable to you compared to when they've won it in 2015 and 2019?
I think the gap has closed. I think they still have outstanding players, and you mentioned Sophia Smith, and I think Trinity Rodman as well. I think that they're exceptional and they're kind of showing that excitement for the US. But I think the Dutch manager spoke on it before their game today, that the difference between the US and everybody else for years has been their athleticism and their fitness, and kind of European teams and that haven't been able to match them for that. But now you see that those top teams and even the lesser teams are on par with them now, and it comes down to the technical ability of the players and the teams. And I think that anyone that's seen either that Netherlands v USA game or seen clips of it, they were very close in terms of the game. Could have went either way in terms of chances in both the first and second half. And the US didn't really look too convincing in their first game. Yes, they won 3-0, but you didn't see what you would expect from them. So it's definitely going to be interesting as the tournament goes on. I don't think they'll go on to win it. I think that other teams are technically better and are playing better football. But the beauty of tournament football is you don't need to peak at the start of the tournament when you're a top team. And aside from everything else, they have the experience and they know what it's like to win tournaments. They've won the last 2 World Cups. So that might stand for them, but I still don't think they'll go all the way and win it this time.
Yeah, and the highlight show, if anybody wants to watch all of today's 3 games, it's on RT2 and the RT Player at 8 p.m. Irish time. And of course, fixtures tomorrow, which is Friday, it's Argentina against South Africa. That's 1 a.m. our time in Dunedin, and then England, Denmark at 9:30 in Sydney, and then China and Haiti at midday. And Anthony, I suppose looking at that, like England and Denmark is probably the standout one, but Haiti gave England a real run for their money, and at the other side of it, Denmark and China probably would have been vying for that second spot, but the Danes are the ones who have probably got the crucial win in that head-to-head so far.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a really obvious thing to say, but like to get a win as early, first up, it's just such a huge thing. I mean, it's only 3 games, in the group stage. So to get out of the blocks quick like that, you always give yourself a big chance. The England game, I know like they weren't great against Haiti. I just think teams like England, they are going to get out of the group. They know they're going to get out of the group, so they'll often start quite slow in these tournaments, and they'll only really get going knockout stages, quarters on. So I wouldn't read too much into that particular performance. They're still a very good side. USA are maybe similar, but as Rianna says, like, I mean, looking at the tournament as a whole, like, it does feels like an open tournament, and it actually feels like it's the type of tournament that that is allowing for a surprise package for somebody to sort of come up the rails and go deep that maybe not too many people were talking about prior to the World Cup beginning. So yeah, look, there's plenty of football left to go, and hopefully hopefully there is a few more surprises, like, because tonight, watching Nigeria tonight, and Rianna is correct to say that, you know, they aren't top, like, they are the strongest team in Africa, and they've got tons of World Cup experience as well. But it was still great to see them just upset the odds and pull off that win, because it just makes everything more interesting. I know we're out, but, you know, we're still going to have a big part to play in how this group shakes down, and you know, Canada and Australia will be home for a big favour off us on Monday night.
Yeah, and I suppose the final point before we go, Rianna, just in terms of, you know, mention some of the kind of the smaller and emerging nations, the likes of Haiti and obviously Philippines. We're talking about Nigeria, you know, getting a result that maybe was slightly unexpected against Australia, but what the Philippines did to New Zealand probably had reverberations. Just because, again, they're newcomers too, and then, you know, Jamaica holding France. It's shaping up. You know, there might have been worries pre-tournament when there's an expansion that there might be a few hidings, but there haven't been too many of those, and actually those new teams have been proving a lot of people wrong.
Yeah, I think obviously coming off the back of the World Cup in France in 2019, people were worried about some of the results and obviously having more teams in the tournament. But looking at it as a whole, it's the best thing that's happened to the Women's World Cup. As you mentioned, some of those results have been amazing. You even speak about New Zealand beating Norway to get their first win in front of a home crowd in their first ever win in a World Cup, which was phenomenal. It's just great stories. And for me, I think my favourite has been the Jamaica draw against France. Might be a little bit biased, and my dad was Jamaican, so I'll always be rooting for them and have a good friend playing with them as well. But those sort of stories are exactly what you want to see, and I think we've seen it in the Men's World Cup last winter as well. So it's just great. And as Anthony says, like, there's still a lot of football still be played in the group stages alone, never mind the rest of the tournament, and who knows what surprises are in store. And obviously the best thing now going into that last game for Ireland in the World Cup is that we do have a part to play, as Anthony says, so there's still a lot to play for. And obviously Ireland want to do ourselves justice, and we want to get that win that we thoroughly believe that we deserve as well.
Yeah, and I suppose, Rianna, for yourself, it's off to Brisbane now at some point.
Yeah, so we leave Perth on Saturday morning, head off to Brisbane, where by all accounts I was speaking to a few of the girls there before the game, said that Brisbane's a beautiful place, the sun is shining, and I'm excited to get there and see that part of Australia as well. But obviously looking forward to getting out of the cold of Perth at the minute.
Yeah, temperatures here are don't hurry back here, because the temperatures in Dublin are sort of, they're not it doesn't feel like July. And Anthony, same to you as well. Enjoy Brisbane for as long as you can. But anyway, look, thanks a million for your time, Rianna, and also Anthony Pyne.
Thanks, Raf.
Thanks, Raf.
Turn the world round, shut the show down. I've been spinning, couldn't slow down. On the roll now.
A supporter and a half likes, shares, comments, and tweets. Cadbury sponsors RTE Soccer Women's World Cup podcast.